recent history has been great for the Florida Panthers at the TD Garden, winning 5 in a row. But this sixth one is going to be a lot difficult. Not only is it to advance to face the Rangers, but to avoid a Game 7 back in Sunrise.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, May 17th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms and conditions apply. So, Florida Panther fans, it is a game day tonight as the Florida Panthers will be visiting the Boston Bruins at the TD Garden tonight at 7 p.m. for Game 6 of this second round series for a chance to advance to the Eastern Conference Final. But it's going to be the toughest test for the Florida Panthers in their pursuit of advancing to the Eastern Conference Final for a second straight season. But it is a Friday, which means it is a Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Nich Fairbanks is back to preview this game between the Florida Panthers and the Boston Bruins, Game 6 from Boston. Nich, welcome back to the show, my friend. And crazy to think also how 3 of the 4 series went to a Game 5 up 3-1, and it took a while for one of the teams to officially clinch, with the Rangers winning in Carolina tonight. But in the second round, 1-4 for the team trying to clinch. Just goes to show how hard it is to get to this stage with the final 8 with the final 8 being in the second round.
It most definitely is. And, you can't really rely upon previous years looking at, last year, the second round, I thought it was pretty easy. I mean, Florida got out in 5, but, you have the juggernaut of teams that are in the second round and they're playing each other. So, you had Carolina, who came in second place to the President's Trophy, winning New York Rangers. You have the Boston Bruins, who decided to, not win the division and play the division-winning Florida Panthers. And then over on the West, you have Edmonton, Vancouver, then you have Dallas and Colorado. So the teams that really everybody would pick to win the Cup are all playing each other right now. And it only is going to lead up to probably a more exciting conference finals between the East and the West.
Yeah, and the only team, when you now think about it, that didn't have home ice to win in the first round was Colorado. So now and even Colorado is not your normal number 3 seed in the Central Division. I know they're going through a little bit of issues with Val Nichushkin. Devontae has been in and out of the lineup too for the Avalanche. Jonathan Duran just returned to the lineup too. So they're going through their fair share of issues on and off the ice. But also for the other side of the bracket on the East, I mean, it's crazy what special teams can do on the New York Rangers side of things. I mean, Chris Kreider had a natural hat trick today, but also special teams for the Rangers has just been a big key in these playoffs. And I mean, we were almost talking about another 3-1 series lead until when Vancouver scored and then Edmonton scored within a minute from each other too. So also and also for the Panthers, when you think about special teams hasn't been a trouble in round number 2, but also you're not seeing a goaltender being chased as for Stuart Skinner and not relying on a third string goaltender for the Vancouver Canucks currently in Artur Shilov. So when you think about the state of the Panthers and thinking about where they are up in a series, special teams is going. Your heart and soul Alexander Barkov is going too, which we've been waiting for. It's great to see the position that the Florida Panthers are in, and going to continue to harp on this. The cards are still stacked in their favor, even even with Marchand possibly coming back, which we'll discuss more in segment two, in segment number 2. But for the Panthers, I mean, everything is in that, and number one, health too. That's a big factor where they come into game number 6 tonight in Boston.
So I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the difference between last year and this year, and this is from what we know, because they obviously didn't say anything last year. They weren't going to let it out that Ekblad was hurt or Montour was hurt. But this year, you can just tell that they're a lot healthier. They're playing a lot better. They're playing as a 5-man unit. I mean, I feel like they're scrappy, but they're not as scrappy as they were last year because they don't need to be. They can play their game. They can dictate what's going to happen. I'm going to say that game 5 was probably their worst game of the series, and they only lost by 1 game. And it's saying a lot after the first game when they lost, 5-1?
Mm-hmm.
And a closeout game, they just, I don't know. I didn't really see the killer instinct from them, and maybe they just had an off night. But you know what? You have 2 chances to close this out. And I think, if you were to, put money on it, I think Florida's got a really good chance to do that. But, if any player on the Panthers gets injured, you have to really wonder, what is going to, how's the depth going to be tested? Are we going to lose if somebody gets hurt, like from the center position? What are those lines going to look like? Who are they going to pull up? Or somebody on defense? Is Josh Maher finally going to get a look into the lineup? Because we haven't seen him in like 2 months. And then you have to think if, knock on wood, if Bob gets hurt, do you go to Stolarz? Or, and I'm really wondering, does the Knight get a start? But
I don't think so.
All hypothetical. That's all I'm saying. It's all hypothetical because you know what? Vancouver's on their 3rd string. It's in the realm of possibility, but I don't think it will.
Yeah, and just how the Vancouver Canucks are doing it with low shot volume too. I mean, PDO is in favor of them right now versus the Boston Bruins. They're getting low shot volume, but not as far as quality for them. And also going into a game 6, as Paul Maurice spoke about it, it's like, what if you have to lose a game 6 in order to win a game 7, but and that helps you along the way. But if you win a game 6, but you get swept in the second round, what if there were lessons to learn from that game 7 too, going into that next series for whichever team that is? That's just talking about 20 plus years of history of coaching and the fact that Maurice has almost seen it all too. So that's a different factor going into as a fan. I know the people listening, and I know us to even talk about it. It's hard to even say those words out loud if you have to lose a game to get to this point, but it helps you in the long run. It doesn't help the nerves there too, but also it gives us a little bit of an opportunity to like take a step back and see, okay, what's the bigger picture here in regard to just trying to continue to find their game, because game 5 was the worst for the effort standpoint. I think the effort was there for game 1, but it was just a matter of just legs weren't going for them too. And and the rest for them. So I think when you hear Paul Maurice say that, it's just you kind of like freeze a little bit too. So what were you thinking when you heard those from the coach?
One, he's either gaslighting us, which, okay, thank you, coach. That means that you feel pretty confident about game 6 and we don't have to worry. Or he's basically saying, hey, listen, this isn't the do or die right now. We have another one just in case. I mean, I think they learned from game 5. They didn't play their best, and yet they still only lost by a goal because Jeremy Swayman played really well. But I have to say that there's going to be some different factors that are going to come into game 6 that we're going to talk about next that could play a big part. And, maybe you don't want to give Boston that kind of momentum, and kind of like what Florida got last year in first round series.
And it's thank you so much for that segue too, which gives us an opportunity to discuss more about what is coming in game 6. And Brad Marchand was back at practice, and he also spoke to the media, and we also got his reaction to the Sam Bennett hit back in Game 3. We're going to discuss that and more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA and NHL, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off and puck drop. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and viewed from your seat, get their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. You can save up to 60% buying from last minute from sports, concert, comedy, theater, and more. Save even more with exclusive in-app deals and select seats ahead of the game or event. Toggling this feature shows the total upfront with no surprises fees at checkout. Get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Get the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get your $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Had to turn down the volume with all the shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day, bringing you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Back on this Friday, May 17th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. So, Nick, Brad Marchand returned to practice for the Boston Bruins, was seen on the second line there. So, skated before Game 5, didn't play. The Boston Bruins found a way to get out a win, even though you spoke about the Florida Panthers not playing well. You did mention a point. Hey, they only lost by 1. And Paul Maurice also spoke about the foolishness is done in regard to post-whistle antics. This is just the time of the series where you can't take a stupid penalty in order to get your team down a man and give them an opportunity on special teams. But hey, the Panthers special teams, their PK is at a 93% versus 59 last year during their first round series. So what an improvement in that unit for the Panthers too. And also, Brad Marchand spoke about the hit from Sam Bennett, spoke about how, hey, sometimes, and I'm paraphrasing here, saying how sometimes you have to try to gain an advantage, and sometimes it might require injuring people and sometimes injuring the opposition. But also spoke about how Bennett got away with one thing. These things kind of happen. I've been on the other side, but then circled around the same amount of words. Got away with one. Yeah, I've been on the other side. But it's part of the game. And then, but really said it like in 3 or 4 sentences consecutively, but just said it in a different way too. So trying to get his point across there. So for the Bennett hit and his reaction, but also what he says about hurting players or injuring players too. How do you view what Marchand had to say during his media availability on Thursday?
I think it's surprising in a way that a player's actually being truthful in what it's like to play in those type of games or in a series. Unfortunately, it makes me think of, if you're not cheating, then you're not trying to win, unfortunately. I think at the end of the day, nobody wants to hurt anybody. Nobody wants to see another player get injured. But the fact of the matter is that they're playing for keeps. They want their name on the cup, and they want all the glory. What's concerning to me is that the league probably isn't going to say anything. Because they didn't say anything about Bennett. Let's be honest. I mean, he said he was protecting himself, but, it's kind of You don't know. And then you have Marchand saying this out loud. I can't imagine the executives are very happy about that. Although I think some fans are for this because they just want to see hits. They want to see fights. They want to see their team do whatever they can to win. But, you and Maurice, or you're quoting Maurice saying that, this is the time of the series that, this is where the post whistles scrums don't happen. I don't know about Game 6. Since Marchand is most likely going to play, I mean, you and I both believe that. You don't think that there's going to be some retribution that they're still looking for? I mean, I don't know if Marchand's going to go after Bennett. He might, because he fought Mikola earlier in the season, and that's a huge size, difference. But it was kind of refreshing to hear in a way, but also – and you got to respect him for that. But at the same time, you think about all the hits that he's laid, all the dirty little things that he's done. Is it all worth it? He has one cup. He doesn't have any others. Is it really worth that much to injure somebody or possibly put their career in jeopardy just so your name could be on a little plate?
Fair. That's fair enough for that. And I am with you that players don't really try to do it, but he is saying the quiet part out loud there.
Mm-hmm.
But if puck is loose, it's in the corner, you're fighting for it, and you want to separate that puck, and even if he's already dishing it, the defenseman is already dishing it out on a breakout, these guys are going to finish their check pretty damn hard, regardless, too. So it's like, what kind of advantage can I gain in trying to get them off their game? I mean, we saw that with Pat Maroon trying to bait Bennett into that, but there's a difference between Marchand trying to get physical with Bennett versus someone like Pat Maroon too. But I think there's going to be physicality more in the finishing of checks, not the post whistle stuff, and that could maybe lead into frustration depending on if it's a 1 goal deficit, regardless of who's winning. No, but obviously if it gets to 3 and we're 5 minutes closer for the game ending, then yeah, something is going to happen. I don't think that much is going to be placed. I don't think you're going to risk that much when you have a chance to bring on the extra attacker and to tie the game and bring it to overtime. But it's going to be. But going back to Marchand, he is going to be in the lineup. Where there's no confirmation, but all signs point to it. Practicing, talking to the media. I can't imagine a scenario where he's not. So that also brings the different dimension back to the lineup where you haven't had to face in 2 days. You've only had to focus on Pastrnak. Charlie McAvoy didn't get a shot on goal until Game 5. Now he's entered the series. Hello, Charlie McAvoy. You're not turning the puck over as much as you were in the first 4 games. And also Maurice spoke about how you can't expect to keep these guys into the teens when it comes to their shots too. So that's another thing with how the Panthers protect with their forecheck and also the little bit of time. If the puck is loose and it's just them flipping it out, then you're getting so many advantages there without even having the last change. If you're just forcing them to flip it too, so that's really what's going to be key for the Florida Panthers going into this one, where you have more of complementary players. The talent on paper is still in favor of the Panthers, but that dimension being back for the Boston Bruins, it's a big deal.
It definitely is, and I will not be surprised at all if Marchand is back up to his tricks, doing things to try and stir up the Panthers and try to get them to draw a penalty. It's just his game. It's his way of being an agitator, and I fully expect him to actually start a few things. Now, it's going to be up to Florida to be the superior team and not react to it. Get him away from Bob or get any of the Bruins players away from Bob because, they seem like they're okay with running into him even though they're taking a penalty. But Florida just needs to play their game. They've taken care of the series so far. I mean, yeah, outside of Game 1 and Game 5, As you said, they kept the Bruins into the teens of shots. This was a really good team during this regular season. You got Florida's keeping them under 20 shots a game. That's ridiculous. It just shows you the 5-man units and what kind of defense they're playing. So if Florida is able to play to their identity again, hopefully this series ends tonight.
Mm-hmm. And for the Panthers, shots per game is 35. Shots against is 21.4 for the opposition. 14 more per game in all situations. So that's gonna you gotta love where that number is at, even though momentum doesn't necessarily go from game to game too. So
correct.
So we'll see on that. But coming up in segment number 3, we are going to continue our preview of tonight's game between the Florida Panthers and the Boston Bruins, as the Florida Panthers go into Boston and are hoping to end this series in 6. They will be coming home, but hopefully it's coming home for practice, getting ready for the Eastern Conference Final instead of a Game 7. We're going to discuss that more here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Third and final segment here on this Friday, May 17th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday, Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. Game 6 tonight, 7 p.m. on TNT. And don't know the announcers yet. I'm actually reaching out to see if anyone, if actually NHL Zone knows who the announcers are. So as of now, we don't know who the announcers are for tonight's game. But so for this one, we've seen down, then 3 ups for the Panthers, and then a down for the Panthers. But we spoke about Alexander Barkov, him being showing up in this series. Sergei Bobrovsky making the timely saves, even if his save percentage doesn't say so here. But one thing that Maurice also spoke about was how the Panthers were just having when it comes to their minds, it wasn't necessarily there, and it was mostly when it came to passes out of the zone. We spoke about the Boston Bruins flipping the puck out and for the Panthers to reset in the neutral zone to avoid a change and to still hopefully get the pucks in deep for the Panthers. But for the Panthers, their problem a lot in Game 5 was misconnecting on passes, resulting in many icings and defensive zone draws where even if you're the home team, you can't change. So a lot has to change for the Panthers as for connecting passes. But if there's one player who needs to have a big game for the Panthers, I'll actually name 2 for them. One of them has to be Carter Verhaeghe. He's third on the Panthers in shots, but 1 goal for them, and one of them was on one of the halves of the double minor back in game 3 for the Panthers. So, and Vladimir Tarasenko too. That's another one that I want to see going for the Panthers, and both of them power play goals too. Thankfully, the Panthers have had that stretch in between games 2 and 4 where they've gotten it going on their power play. And here's the thing. The Boston Bruins have been very, very mistake prone in this series. Spoke about the too many men, but too many men has been a thing all throughout the league too. And also embellishment has been cracked down too more. It's happening in every single series, Nick. And even though the Lundell one, That's not a cross check nor an embellishment. That's either 4-on-4 or play on for that. So we know what's going to be looked for in games like these. So it's going to be up to the Panthers. Nick, get to the net front, and I don't know if the mistakes from the Boston Bruins history in the series tells me they're going to shoot themselves in the foot again, but we can't rely on it.
No, we can't. The forecheck has to be there to cause that, number one. It depends on how Florida wants to set up during the game. I mean, their forecheck is one of the best in the league, and they're the hardest to play against. But, if Boston's kind of figured out what they want to do to get out of that, then Florida's going to have to regroup and figure out what they're going to do, what kind of attack they're going to do, if they're going to continue to dump and chase, or if they're just going to let Barkov try to walk in every single time with the puck. But, you said you had the two players. Carter Verhaeghe definitely is one of them. I honestly think if he scores tonight, they're going to win the game. It always kind of like correlates with that. Verhaeghe kind of gives them a huge lift, or he scores a timely goal, Mr. Clutch, and he always puts the team over the top. Haven't really seen him the last couple of games. The other player that I have not seen really all series, besides in the penalty kill, Kevin Stenlund.
Mm-hmm.
That is somebody who I think is due for a dirty goal or a shorthanded goal. He's done everything well. He's won faceoffs, key faceoffs. He's played defense very well. And he's been that good on the penalty kill for the Panthers. Is why they have a 93% kill rate right now. So if those two players, I think, come to play or they get on the scoreboard, I think it's going to look pretty good for the Panthers, because it means that you have the depth there. You have your first line scoring and you have your fourth line. Meanwhile, you have your second line. Maybe Bennett will score, just to kind of, again, rub it in Boston's faces. But at least then you'll have your second and third lines that can help preserve or play the game that they want.
Yeah. Just playing over 12 minutes a game and over 50% on his draws, 53.3 on his draws too. So taking those very important, especially in the defensive zone where he's money, he's necessary for that, for them. And he's likely going to have some not new, but because he's played with them, but different line mates this time around, as Sam Bennett and Sam Reinhart were not in practice, but Coach Maurice said that they were fine. Lawrence and Okposo filled the top parts. So Gadjevich, Lomberg, and Cousins were filling the other parts, like filling in and out. So we don't know what the lines are going to look like too. And it's funny, Nick, I asked you last week if Cousins was going to be the scratch for the Panthers going into the weekend last week. And I was thinking, is Cousins going to be the scratch? And you made me doubt myself too there. I was like, when you were saying it can't be, it can't be Cousins. But I do have a feeling that he's probably going to draw back to the lineup. If he's the first one out, he's going to be the first one back in. And the thing is, for Lawrence, the thing with taking him out is the flexibility of center and wing too. But also with Nick Cousins, just like Sam Bennett, without the goal scoring touch and not as much meanness, he also fits with the identity of the Panthers too. And also, fourth line didn't have the best game in their limited minutes too last go round. So I think that's a little bit of a little spark plug that is needed, putting Cousins back. Yeah, Maurice isn't going to go as much as shifting him back to the top six right now. They're still up in the series, so you don't need to go into that panic mode there for Cousins. But probably a little bit of a spark plug that he's going to provide to the lineup, assuming that he's the guy who comes in.
Imagine that they put Nick Cousins in for Game 6 after I told them not to take him out of the series beginner. And he's going to play a role. He always has a role to play. Whether he's going to be an agitator and get under the team's skin, or if he's just going to play a very good depth guy on the fourth liner. As you said, maybe Maurice goes to that second line of Bennett, Tkachuk, and Cousins, because that line is nothing but heart and soul. And I think the team could really use that, and as I say heart and soul, I think of Ryan Lomberg. It's been a while, but at the same time, I think he has to earn trust. He's got to earn trust of the coaching staff, knowing that he's going to go out there and give it his best, but also not take dumb penalties. So whatever Maurice is thinking or whatever he's going to do, I think he's doing it to win tomorrow. And if they can get some fresh players out on the ice to help them push them over the top, I'm all for it.
Yeah, and when you look at where the Boston Bruins' bottom six is to Florida, where for Florida, you have guys who can be on a middle six of other teams who are middle of the pack, while Florida, this is their bottom, this is their fourth line where you can just interchange here for them. And going into this one, I mean, I never thought for a second Nick Cousins was going to be out for the lineup out of the lineup for a long time. I always thought that it was going to be something so temporary. And listen, it's going to be the same thing if they advance past this round too. Something goes a little bit off the rails. You make a little bit of a change here and there. I mean, we even said it before the postseason. 10 forwards are solidified in the lineup. You just gotta fill out who's going to be those guys who are going to be playing with Kevin Stenlund too. So it's just a matter, and who knows, maybe that gets Kevin Stenlund going too and what they could bring, because like we said before every series, top guys are going to cancel each other out. What can the depth guys do? Look, Stenlund, Tarasenko, Erod has had a great series too. Credit to him for showing up in this one. So
don't
that's
forget
really,
about my boy Lundy.
Yes, Lundell, sharp angle shot for that goal back in Game 4 too. So that's another thing. So we'll see. We'll see what happens after Game 6. If the Panthers will plug their ticket in, punch their ticket, into the conference final. And listen, it says 0-25 for the Boston Bruins, for them being down 3-1. Just
that's history.
It's what matters is right now. Just win right now. Take care of business. Don't worry about anything else, and just worry about the win. And like Nick said, play for the win. Don't put any possibility and don't put any confidence into the Boston Bruins that they could come back to South Florida and even sniff a chance at the conference final, because you like we said, you'll take the Game 7 on home ice, but you definitely don't want to even begin to think about that position, even though Paul Maurice says, what if you have to win in 7? Going back to that original point. But Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this Fairbanks Friday edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Another successful show with you, my friend. Tell everybody where they can follow you online.
Thank you again, Armando. It's been fun so far. Let's hope tonight we can close it out and not have the pressure of Game 7 at home. That's what I'm worried about. But to end on a high note, let's win. Let's take on the Rangers, that Cinderella story that they're on. Let's take out the President's Cup or trophy winners, and let's go farther than that. Let's try to bring that cup home. But you guys can follow me on X at Prudential0, and I look forward to the next show.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nick. See you next time.
See you next time.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steel Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Nich Fairbanks, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.